So it's basically like he says, fine, if you don't want me, then I don't want you. And he rejects the father as well as all that the father represents, which is masculinity. Now, deep down inside, he's still craving that. He's still craving for that acceptance and love of his father, but he just can't take the rejection, and so he detaches. So instead of soaking in masculinity at this very important stage, he continues to stay connected with his mother, and he soaks in femininity. And usually, for the boy that ends up with same-sex attractions, there are also other females giving input into his life. Usually there's at least a sister or more, a few sisters, an aunt, a grandmother, other females in his life. And so what happens is he soaks in all this femininity, and he learns all about girls and what girls are all about. But he's craving to learn about boys. He's craving to learn about who he is as a boy. He wants to know about that, but he's not getting that. And so he goes on soaking in femininity, craving masculinity. Well, by the time he is ready to start school, he will often, not always, but typically, have a difficult time connecting with other boys, because either he'll feel intimidated by other boys, or he'll just feel more comfortable with girls because that's who he's always been with. Or if he's developed any feminine mannerisms, he might be rejected by the other boys. So he goes to school and he's craving acceptance from them, and he wants relationship with them, but he will typically end up sticking with the girls and having lots of girls for friends and not connecting with the boys, and so those needs for same-sex connection go unmet. So he goes on through elementary school, watching the boys from afar, wishing he could be with them, wishing that they would notice him and accept him and love him, but all the while just getting a stronger sense of femininity and what females are all about. So by the time this child reaches puberty, he certainly isn't going to be interested in the opposite sex. He already knows all about the opposite sex. He's kind of been hanging out with the girls most of his life. What he is curious about and intrigued by are boys. That's what he's still wanting to know, and that's what he's still needing. Let me say this. When God-given needs go unmet, those needs do not go away. Those needs will usually either intensify or take on another form. And so for a boy whose need for same-sex connection has not been met, by the time he reaches puberty, that need has not gone away. That need has intensified, it has grown, it's like a hunger inside of him that is just deepening. And so this is what happens. At puberty, the body is starting to change and he's beginning to develop sexual feelings, and it's almost like the wires get crossed. It's almost like that hunger for male love that God gave him now becomes a sexualized hunger for male love. Now, to him, what it feels like is that he's sexually attracted to these other boys, that he needs a romantic relationship with them. Well, that's not what he needs. What he needs is healthy, non-sexual, emotionally deep relationships with other boys and with his father. But to him, it feels like a sexual need. It feels like a craving for a romantic relationship. And it's very important to realize how strong these feelings are, because when a Christian comes along and says to him, "You're just choosing to feel that way. Shame on you. You should stop." Well, you know what happens? Immediately, the Christian loses credibility, because he says to himself, "You don't know what you're talking about. I have felt this way my whole life. I'm not choosing to feel this way." In fact, most of them will tell you they begged God to take it away. And it doesn't always work that way, because those are legitimate needs that need to be met in right ways. That God doesn't usually just take those needs away. They're intended to be met in right ways through non-sexual male connection. So it's very important to realize that change is possible, and developing healthy relationships with other males is an option, but not to downplay the severity of the situation for the person who's dealing with that. I do want to just say a couple of words about lesbianism. Lesbianism, like I said, is a little bit more complex. I'm going to give you, there are actually a number of things that can contribute to lesbian development. So I'm just going to give you 3 more common forms, and again, there are a lot of others. But so one form of lesbianism starts out just like what I just described with the male version, that the girl is more of a tomboy and she hangs out more with the boys her whole life, but she's craving femininity. She's craving a sense of her own femininity and female input from others. And so for her, it's very similar to that track that I just described with the male development. The second type is a girl who is more feminine, and she probably has had a decent relationship with her mother, but somewhere very early on, maybe even in infancy, there was a break in the relationship with the mother. Now, they may have gone on to have a fine relationship, but that break occurred. Either the baby was hospitalized, or maybe the mother was hospitalized, or maybe the mother suffered depression. But for whatever reason, there was a break in the bonding early on, and even if they went on and they had a fine relationship, there's been a void left. And so for her, lesbianism is like a search for motherly love. And then the third type is a girl who has been hurt by males in her life, either abused or molested. And so for her, lesbianism is protection from further hurt from a male. And then there's one other factor. It's called emotional dependency. And this can actually even occur with two heterosexual women who get involved in a relationship that is unhealthy. Emotional dependency is when two people become overly involved with one another and seek the other person to meet their deepest emotional needs. It's a very unhealthy thing. And what can happen is, even if two women are heterosexuals, but they get involved in this very unhealthy relationship where there's emotional dependency, that can actually begin to cross boundaries physically, and that can actually become a sexualized relationship. But again, there are many different forms and types of lesbianism, and that's just sort of a basic overview.